text the. So we'll wait a few minutes for the members to join on.
Hello, everyone.
Hey, Jim. Looks like we're just missing Chris and Terry.
Is Chris on?
And oh yeah, there's Chris. I see Chris now.
Yeah, I'm here, man. Sorry, you being outside of the courthouse and not on my regular laptop. It was trying to tell me no in every possible language. At least we have good security.
And I think Terry might be the last one. Yep, Terry's on now. All right, so we'll go ahead and call the finance committee meeting to order. If Karen, if you please take a roll call.
Sure. Mr. Bale,
Here.
Mr. Drexel,
Here.
Mr. Horton. Saw him there.
You're on mute, Mr. Horton.
We'll come back to him. Mrs. Showerman. Here. Mr. Scatella,
Here.
Mr. Winarski,
Here.
Chairman Copeland.
Here.
Mr. Horton, I see you.
Here.
All right.
All right, before we jump into agenda, because we got a lot to get through today, we've not been very consistent about this, the habit of not having public comment. I see a lot of people online. So if there's any citizens wishing to be heard, you can have an opportunity to speak now. Any citizens wishing to be heard? Finally, any citizens wishing to be heard? Seeing none. So we have our normal agenda for the meeting coming up on Tuesday with 13 items. In discussion with some of the other council members, we do not have a caucus prior to tomorrow's meeting. And so we wanted to take some of the time to discuss the vetoes and the ordinance that Mr. Talarico has written up. If it's okay with everyone, I plan to get through these first items on our finance agenda, enter into recess. We will take care of personnel, and then we'll reconvene the finance committee to get through the veto overrides. And there is an issue that we probably need to go into executive session to discuss at the end. If we get too long for members, please just speak up and we can break it up and maybe take an extra half hour before tomorrow's meeting or something. So I'm going to try to get through this finance agenda pretty quick. I'm going to combine a few items if there's no objection. The first thing on our agenda, resolution approving the 2025 solicitor contract for the office of the Erie County Controller. I'm not sure if there's anybody from the county or from the controller's office that would speak to that. Pretty routine every year. If there's no objection, we'll keep moving that one forward. The next one, let me check to make sure I wasn't on mute this whole time. The next item, another resolution approving the 2025 solicitor contract for the office of the Erie County Sheriff. Don't see anybody at the sheriff's office here to speak on that issue. Keep moving forward. Resolution approving the 2025 solicitor contract for the office of the Erie County Clerk of Records. same thing. Next, number lease agreement with Moxie for real estate for the office space located at 809 West 12th Street for Judge Allison Scarpitti. Any concerns or questions there? Hearing none, we'll keep going with that one. Items 5 and 6, substantially similar. Tax exonerations, both for properties where there had previously been a mobile home and one does no longer exist. We've done quite a few of those this year. There's no objection. We'll move those both forward. Item number 7, a little different situation, I believe, with Corey, in which somebody paid a bill on time, but they showed that they had a penalty and additional fees. Both the Corey School District and I believe it's Corey. Am I right, Charlie? Do you know about this issue?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it's.
Yeah, that's what I thought. The other two bodies have already removed the penalties and fees because it was not a late payment. And then also number 8, resolution approving the tax exoneration of multiple parcels owned by the redevelopment authority of the city of Erie. Any questions or concerns there? Anyone to speak to it? It's a little awkward doing these meetings via Zoom. And then finally, items 9 through 13 are all repository sales for private individuals. And hearing if there's no objection, I'd like to consider moving all of these forward all at one time. Hearing none. I will call for a recess for Mr. Winarski to take it away with the personnel. Jim?
Thank you. I'd like to call the personnel meeting to order. And I think I'm going to follow Rock on trying to consolidate some of these as we had first read on items 1 through 11 on 11/21/24, which are ordinances 85 to 95. Does anybody have anything or any thoughts on any of those on the agenda? Or does Ann have any comments?
This is just the standard that we bring to council with the pay plan and the appointed officials' salaries for the coming year. I think we may have spoke about this in the previous finance meeting. Any questions? We're happy to answer. Amanda's on as well.
I think we're pretty good. Jim, you're back on mute.
Okay, if nobody else is, everybody is good with those, we'll move on to number 12. 2024 appointed official salary ordinance, full-time assistant public defender.
That's part of the previous ones too. I'm sorry.
No, it's,
Okay.
this was a new hire to replace Attorney Groner.
Oh, I'm sorry. My mistake. Yes, sorry.
No, I apologize. I thought maybe I, this was not a new position. This is a replacement of an attorney that left our office this summer. This individual is coming up from another county in Pennsylvania, from a public defender's office a couple counties away. I'm asking for a 3% increase over the posted salary as a result of his experience, as well as the number of cases that our assistant public defenders are handling in Erie County. Are there any questions?
I'm good.
Mr. Chair, if I may. Would this is position 001 budgeted for 111,000 in 2025, is that correct?
No, this is position 002, and I don't have any assistant public defenders that have started over somewhere in the 70s, depending upon their experience.
Oh, I'm looking at the wrong ordinance in the packet, that's why. What was the budget for this position? Are we within budget?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, that's all. I was looking at the at the chief public defender. Sorry.
Okay, any other questions? We'll move on to number 13, possible appointment of Jeffrey Horniman to the NWPA Job Connect Board, Workforce Development Board, term to expire June 30th, 2028, brought forward by the county executive. Number 14, possible appointment of Robert Buell to the Erie County Conservation Board, term to expire December 31st, 2028, brought forward also by the county executive. Number 15, possible reappointment of Timothy M. Zizulia, JD, to the Erie County Board of Health, term to expire December 31st, 2028, brought forward by the county executive. 16, possible appointment of Patricia Fott to the Erie County Agricultural Land Preservation Board, term to expire December 31st, 2027, brought forward by the county executive. And 17, possible appointment of Dean Curtis to the Erie County Land Preservation Board, partial term to expire December 31st, 2025. Any comments on any of those appointments?
Yes, Chairman, Andre speaking.
Hi.
No, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hello. Yeah, no comment on any of the names put forward, but I intend to put forward my gaming revenue, my gaming authority appointments term is up the end of December, and I will be putting forward an appointment for this month's agenda as well. And I will forward that bio or resume to Karen to be prepared for Tuesday.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Yeah, it will be Daryl Smith, formerly of the City Mission. Mm-hmm. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Anything else for the good of the order?
I'm good.
Hearing none, we'll call the personnel, or wait, were we gonna go to executive session? Is that what you wanted to do, Rob?
I think we'll go in the executive after we get through the vetoes, if time allows. I
Okay.
think that some council members might be tired of the conversation by the time we get there.
Very good. Well, personnel is over. Meeting is adjourned.
Okay, we'll go ahead and reconvene the finance committee meeting. So again, given that we do not have a caucus prior to tomorrow's meeting, wanted to give an opportunity for council members to step through this together. I'm going to be referring to each of the strikes or vetoes as relates to the item number under Attorney Tallarico's ordinance. Would it be helpful if I shared my screen, or do you guys have that in front of you?
I don't. Sharing your screen is great.
Yes, I agree.
Megan, if you could enable screen sharing, the host has it disabled. Or Karen. I'll pop her a message real quick. So as I go through this, Tom and I had a lengthy conversation last night with a couple of issues of the ordinance, and I've proposed some amendments that I would bring forward and ask the body to publish on tomorrow's agenda, the ordinance as amended.
You can try now.
Screen one. So I'm going to work from this document here. So the first override vote, County Council moves to strike the executive's veto ordinance 72 Children and Youth Services Fund budget as amended to eliminate $100,000 of gaming fund. This is one of the first which I requested an amendment. It refers to the Children and Youth Come on. Oh, I have it open in another window. That should read the 2025 Planning and Community Fund budget. That was the $100,000 transfer from the gaming fund budget to the planning fund budget. I have here an email in front of me from October 23rd inquiring about this transfer because it does not appear in the gaming budget. And the administrator had said yes, that they agreed with me, that they would put forward an action sheet to correct that. I had not seen any such action sheet, and council's fix was to remove this transfer from the planning fund budget so that they would match. So I will note that if this was a legal veto, there is no such transfer that appears under the gaming fund, and it's a check without a routing number because the veto does not include some method of including that transfer in the planning fund budget that is passed. But I'll turn over to Attorney Talarico to discuss why the language is to strike.
Well, very simply, if you assume everything from the veto as true, the county executive is trying to increase what council decreased by $100,000. This is the same issue that's involved and will come up over and over again with some of the motions to strike that appear in this ordinance. But it's the same issue that's involved in the pending lawsuit. Namely, that the executive's veto does not extend to increasing or adding to the budget which council has already adopted. There is only one budget every year, and that budget is council's ordinance. There is no preceding budget, and there is no validity or legal significance whatsoever to the document that is the proposed budget that is submitted by the executive. So again, the argument is that because you will not see the word appropriation throughout the Home Rule Charter, except when it's connected to Erie County Council, and there is nothing in the charter that would suggest, quite illogically, that the executive would have the power to appropriate or add monies. It's not within the authority of the administration to try to veto an item where council has reduced the budget, reduced the item in the budget. And this is a classic example of that, number one.
Is there any questions or comments from council regarding this? Okay, hearing none, I'll go to item 2. County Council moves to strike executive veto of ordinance 72, 2025 planning and community fund budget as amended, action sheet 4, to decrease the ARPA fund balance of $900,000 and transfer to the planning department. I'll take a step back real quick. Does anybody take issue with the amendment proposed to correct the budget title to be 2025 planning and planning and community fund budget?
Mr. Chair.
Yeah.
Yeah, for the edification of council, this is what I prepared here. It was a simplification of the budget, of what's really going on in the budget. And that is simply that the ARPA fund is being reduced by $900,000. Your further explanation is, which would be the amendment to add additional language to show what is exactly is being done in the budget, is fine. And so I had no problem with the amendment that I prepared to include your language that we're now looking at.
Yeah, and I had meant to take a step back to item 1 just to make sure that nobody took issue with changing the title. This one here is still slightly incorrect, but it's the 2025 planning budget. And it'll appear as correct. Does anybody take issue with that amendment to the ordinance and moving that forward? Hearing none, I'm assuming we'll move forward with that. And then what Tom is addressing there is the original version here had, as he said, maybe a little oversimplified, that it was a veto representing $900,000, but that contained within it $75,000 appropriated from ARP, the fund balance appropriated from the Greenways fund balance, and the pass-through grant expense line item reduction of $900,000. Tom, do you want to address why that would be a strike and not an override?
Yeah, for the same exact reason that I explained in for number 1. Same idea, same theory. The executive is vetoing the elimination of a job and a reduction of payment for that job, and the executive does not have the authority to add it back in.
Any questions or comments from council on either the amendment or the action? You guys got me worried. I'm on mute or something. Okay, we'll step forward into item number 3. Council moves to override the executive's veto of ordinance number 73. This was the position that we had added back in at the request of the courts, that they did not know that this position had been eliminated and had asked us to add that back in. That was a 7-0 vote. Everyone agrees that this would be a correct and legal veto, that we might simply move to override.
Just for the edification of council, this here is a proper veto because council, in its wisdom, decided that it was more appropriate to keep that job in domestic relations for whatever reasons they discussed. The executive had a different idea, and he wanted to reduce that item or eliminate it. And he's within his authority to veto that. And that's why, in order for that position to be established and paid for, council would have to override it with 5 votes.
Questions, comments, concerns from anyone? Okay. Moving on to item 4, County Council moves to strike executive's veto of ordinance number 75 to decrease the salary increases for the 911 telecommunicators, I think everyone recalls that this is the issue that I spoke at length, in which we seem to agree 7-0 that we did not have the authority to budget for a salary increase outside of the contract of the union. I think we can say that this is a strike because similar to what Tom's been discussing, that items that were reduced by council cannot be increased through a veto. Any questions or concerns, thoughts?
No, I think that, perhaps to move things along, I think council now has the idea. Maybe they had the idea before, but I think maybe we could or you could just go through each one and ask whether there's any questions, unless we get to one that's a little more complicated and needs an explanation.
Sure. Similarly, for number 5, a strike for an increase that eliminated the EMS program, 4-3 vote. Any questions or comments from council on that motion to strike? Hearing none, we'll move on to number 6. $2 million to 0, a 4-3 vote. Any questions or concerns? Number 7 has a little bit more nuance. It requires an edit. Previously, it had said moves to override executive's veto as amended action sheet 5 to decrease municipal projects fund budget to 0. That was not entirely correct. The appropriated from the gaming fund budget for the $4.2 million. So this would be an amendment to the ordinance as it was published. Any questions, concerns about the proposed amendment? Not sure if I'm giving you guys time to get off of mute. Okay. Existed in council's budget. Number 8, council moves to override executive veto for Pleasant Ridge Manor to transfer $500,000 from the general fund to Pleasant Ridge. That was a 7-0 vote, as it was marked on my page. I seem to remember that being a 6-1, but maybe I'm wrong. Any questions or concerns on that? Number 9, county council moves to strike executive veto for ARPA to reduce the ARP funding of $75,000 to the planning department. This one is slightly different in that it is tied to the second veto, where he's vetoing to increase to proceed those funds with similarly reduced the transfer out of ARPA matching ordinance, a 4-3 vote strike, as it is a veto for an increase to transfer. Any concern there? Okay. The next 4, I believe, 1, 2, 3, 4, have a bit of nuance that we'll need Attorney Talarico to address, but all of these are for the appropriations to Diverse Erie, to ECRA, to grow to the redevelopment authority for purposes of Grow Erie, and also redevelopment authority for purposes of affordable housing. Each of these contain a strike and an override. Tom, can you talk about why these are slightly different?
Well, starting with number 10, what the executive did is he vetoed the entire, the executive, he vetoes in this budget and all previous budgets, he has vetoed action sheets. And action sheets really are nothing more than council notes in a vehicle which council uses to simplify and understand the various changes or amendments to the actual budget which they've taken. And sometimes, and this is an example of one, the administration will, and not just this administration, but all previous administrations as well, they will veto just the action sheet. And in this case, the action sheet provided really two things, not one. So in each of these instances, number 10, 11, 12, and 13, the ordinances could have been broken up into two different ordinances in which the executive may have an opportunity to override or veto. So what I did is I broke them up. So if you see number 10, first council has the right to strike the ordinance because it reduces funding for municipal infrastructure of $2.5 million. Once again, it's a reduction, and the administration does not have the authority to override, or excuse me, to veto reductions. On the other hand, the same motion includes a motion to override the executive's veto to transfer the same monies and thereby increase funding to the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Commission. And he has that authority because council is adding $2.5 million to the DEI. So once again, there's a reduction that council took part in with this, with the budget, and there's an addition which council took part in. The executive has the right to veto, excuse me, the executive does not have the right to veto the decrease in the one budget, but he has the right to override, or excuse me, to veto the addition by council in the other budget. The same thing you'll find in number 11. And there, council attempts to, or he attempts to veto council's reduction of funding of $2.5 million to the municipal infrastructure, which he cannot do, but he does have the right. Well, this includes a transfer and increase of funding to ECRA Childhood and Initiative. So there should be language in there and to override the transfer and increase of funding to the ECRA Childhood Initiative Program. I think that would appear, that amendment, by the way, appears in the amended ordinance that I prepared. And now you see it on your screen. So that works very much like the ordinance before. And then the one afterwards is the same thing, only it's involving a $750,000 reduction from ARPA and from municipal infrastructure, and a $750,000 addition of funding to the Redevelopment Authority for the Grow Erie project. So procedurally speaking, council will have to vote on each one of these 2 times. Once on the motion to strike, and secondly on the motion to override. And then finally, number 13, like the other 3, is the same thing. Council has reduced monies and funding to the municipal infrastructure by $750,000 and increased funding for affordable housing to be administered by the Redevelopment Authority.
Any questions, concerns, thoughts on these 3 ordinances? Or 4? I thought there'd be some more robust conversation. Moving on to number 14. Moves.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, sir.
Yeah, I was waiting. I thought there'd be some conversation on those last four as well, because it's important to note that those last four involve American Rescue Plan funds, and everyone knows the requirement placed on those funds. And so I'd just like to remind myself and the rest of our colleagues that this money runs the risk of being sent back. We don't do this action properly. So, okay, that's it.
Thank you, Mr. Horton.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
that is an important point that Mr. Horton brings up. Council has taken a position that it wants to use $500,000 or use 5 million plus of ARPA monies to spend, and it's correct that money has to be committed before the end of the year. It's been laying around for a couple of years, and now we're coming to the end, and the administration hasn't taken any action whatsoever to distribute that monies. And more specifically, with respect to the municipal gap fund, that was $500,000, and that money's been in there for at least 2 years, if not longer. And yet only $750,000 have been taken out of it. It's crucial, as Mr. Horton points out, that council take the responsibility for ensuring that this money is spent, and the failure to override it will lead to the potential that this money goes back to the Treasury. And it may look like a black eye with the administration and or county council if that's not done.
Yeah, just adding some clarification, the municipal gap fund was a $5 million appropriation, but that fund still contained about $4 million.
4 point something. It was a little over $4 million in the municipal gap, and it sat there. And our solicitor is correct. There has been no action taken for it, and now we're left in the dubious distinction of having to save him from himself, or save our citizens from sending $8 million of much needed American Rescue Plan funds back.
And I would add too, we may be depoliticizing it just a little bit. It would be a great tragedy for this money to just not be spent. And so I would just add that really hoping to see that we rise to the occasion and override and make sure that these monies are deployed to the community, because this was always for the benefit of our citizens. So I'll leave it at that. So I lost my place here just a bit. I've been working off of 2 copies, one that was amended and one that had not been. We discussed the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 amendments that have been brought forward. That should conclude all of the amendments that required, except for one on number 21. So I'll just work from the amended copy, just for everyone to be on the same page.
Can we do I hate to be but can we do a quick recap? As I had item 1 strike, item 2 strike, item 3 was vote. The action would be to vote to override or not. Item 4 strike. Somehow I don't have notes for 5, 6, and 7. Could you quickly?
Yeah. 5, 6, and 7 was strike, and strike.
Okay, gotcha.
And one amendment to this document that I didn't mention on number 11, this had originally said moves to override and has since been amended to strike and override. So that has been corrected as well.
Yeah, got that.
Okay.
Yeah. So we're on 14.
This should put us on number 14. County Council removes to override the veto of ordinance number 83 as amended to increase wages and fringes for a new position under Conduct of Elections Department. I think we're all aware of what that was. That was a 7-0 vote. If there's no comments, I'll keep moving. Number 15, County Council moves to override the executive's veto of ordinance number 83. This relates to the addition or us including a budget for the Human Relations Fund. It's actually 15 and 16 of the same issue. Action sheets 12 and 13 for adding in the Human Relations Commission, which was a 6-1 vote. Questions, thoughts, concerns on those two? Okay. Moving on to item 17, which curiously is also action sheet 17 from the general fund budget to eliminate the position of the administrative assistant, which is a moves to strike. This is a position that had been eliminated by council. Strike as it seeks to increase funds for that restoration of that position. Any questions? Okay. Moving on to 18, County Council moves to strike executive veto of ordinance 83 general fund budget action sheet 20 to defund, eliminate the Economic Development Bureau and all associated revenues and expenditures. It's also a move to strike. I have one concern with this veto. Should it be the case, and I don't think it will be, that the judge decides that they rule for the administration and that they do somehow have an ability to strike an undefined action sheet. What was not done is a similar veto for the roughly $200,000 of positions, travel, computer software budget that was added into planning as it relates to this in another budget. I'm a little concerned about the implications of this veto if he has not also vetoed the two positions that we moved into planning. Does that then mean that the administration just gets an additional $200,000 to spend in planning? I'd love to hear some thoughts on it. It's really concerning to me that he has not vetoed both this action sheet and the action sheet as it appears under the planning fund budget. I will continue to have that concern by myself.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
if I were the county executive, I would not veto any money that's, well, I would think twice about it, but if council is giving a certain department of mine money for a couple of positions and I want them, I would not say anything about it. I would certainly not veto it, and nor has the executive vetoed it. But on the other hand, clearly council has the right to shut this department down, and clearly the executive does not have the right to veto it. And I don't, the idea that in the future, what will the law say is too speculative to answer at this moment.
Sure.
And so I think that, we just have to go with, what council intended, namely to eliminate and shut down this department and remove the employees, save the employees actually, by removing them to the planning department where this entire thing should have been from the beginning and used to be.
Thank you for your comments.
I mean, this program initially created by the prior executive came out of the planning department.
Yeah, and I very much appreciate your comments related to the legality of the veto, but the policy should be separated to some extent, but yes, I do agree with the sentiment. Going on to number 19, motion to strike, to reduce the wages and fringes of the position of the manager of procurement. This was a position that was budgeted to have a 23% raise. The council reduced it to a 10% raise. It was a vote 7-0. Motion to strike as is an increase from a reduction. Any questions? Number 20, County Council moves to strike the executive veto of ordinance 83 as amended action sheet 27 to defund the position of the public information officer. Also a strike as it seeks to add in a position that does not exist in council's budget. Number 21 is a little curious. Our action sheet had a restriction on it that the grant fund for Fly Erie program should be subject to the restrictions based on ordinance number 64. And there is a motion to strike that veto. Tom, can you address why that would be a motion to strike?
Well, in the first place, this is the 2025 budget. And this same ordinance was presented to council about a month ago to be funded by 2024 budget monies, not 2025. That ordinance that council passed that included the restrictive language was subsequently vetoed by the administration on November 25th. Council has 30 days to override that ordinance or until Christmas, December 25th. All of that action, in other words, the fact that there's another 2024 ordinance and budget money that's pending would suggest that this particular veto, well, first, the council's decision to address this was, I believe, inappropriate. And certainly the administration's veto or just having this ordinance in there, it doesn't belong. Otherwise, we're gonna, you could potentially pay this fund twice with 2024 money and 2025.
Yep, sounds about right.
That is a motion to strike. Moving on to number 22, County Council moves to override veto to action sheet 34 to add a position of the database administrator at the request of the court's computer department. I do think that description might be slightly inaccurate in that conversations among council that we wished to add a position to the court's computer department. There had been a discussion that somehow we had added a new position, and that this was a position that was said to us to be vacant under the administration's IT, which was removed via a different action sheet. And this action sheet simply sought to move that vacant position to the court's IT, but is recognized as a valid veto. Seeking to override, it was a 5-2 vote. Any questions? Okay. Moving on to 23, we only got 32 of these to get through. Moving on to 23, moves to override executive veto of ordinance number 83 under general fund budget as amended action sheet 35 to fund 2 vacant court reporter positions. These were the 2 positions that the courts had told us that they very much still needed, and that had been removed without their knowledge or approval. We voted 7-0 to add those back in at the court's request. executive seeks to veto for them to not exist. Any questions? Moving on to 24, County Council moves to override veto per action sheet 40 to fund vacant position of civil records clerk in the Department of Sanitary, including associated wages. Similar story. The clerk had told us that they very much still needed this vacant position, and that they sought for us to add it back in, and we did so by a 7-0 vote. And the executive looks to veto. Number 25, County Council moves to override executive veto as amended per action sheet 43 to fund the position of the deputy sheriff in the sheriff's office. This would be both 24, or rather both 25 and 26, same subject matter for two separate sheriff's positions that we voted on a 4-3 to add in at the request of the sheriff. And I will say, to some extent, the courts who have said that they have had many times that they've been in court and have not had security present for their proceedings. Any questions there? The next two are also substantially similar, though dealing with the sheriff's office and the DA, in which
Mr. Chair,
yes, sir.
I was on mute and you didn't hear me. Going
yes.
back to those two sheriff's positions,
Yes, sir.
I did talk to the sheriff, and there was a public comment made in a news conference by the county executive that we had, or he had, empty spots available that he hasn't filled. There is no deputy sheriff's spots open. They are all filled. And this is, he wanted a couple more in order to keep the courthouse safe, the courtroom safe. And that was with my conversation I had with him the day before yesterday. And I might as well speak to the overtime issue now too. The overtime issue is that amount of money that he wants to give for overtime, to $50,000. The sheriff said it's not enough. In fact, right now for the month of December, he had to go into his budget and take from one item to move it to his overtime budget to be able to pay overtime to the sheriffs. And what he fears is the security around the courthouse, number one, the security when we're in the building, and the security when there are court hearings. And it's going to come to a point, if this figure stays in there, that one of these days he's not going to be able to have the deputies to pay overtime to, that watches the courthouse when we have meetings. And if a court hearing runs longer than 4:30, the deputies will leave because if there's no money to pay overtime. So I'm just making council aware of that it's not too much to pay for security for the people that come to the courthouse for business, for the people that work in the courthouse, for the judges, the jurors, and county council.
Thank you. I'll just add that we received an email on November 13th that followed our budget meetings with a lot of these departments, where the sheriff and the DA had budgeted overtime of 0. And on November 13th, we received this email. For your information, here are the action sheets provided by the administration. We've had a lot of discussion about whether or not the administration is allowed to put forward an action sheet, but they requested us to add in $354,000 under the sheriff and $148,000 under the DA. And both of their explanations came with the phrase, "were inadvertently left out." And council voted 7-0 for both of these action sheets because we agreed that, yes, they had been left out. And we took no issue with the numbers put forward by the administration to add in. And yet somehow we find these to be vetoed. And I thought that was also important. We didn't ask for it.
Mm,
We just ran with their numbers and then they vetoed their own numbers.
mm.
Hey, Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir.
is Ann still on here?
Let me look.
Or somebody from HR? Anybody?
Um,
No, I don't see either.
All right. I just want, I mean, they must do some sort of daily report for positions. I just wanted to hear it from HR that there are no open sheriff positions.
Mm.
if it works.
Well, you can reach out to her.
Yeah.
Call her tomorrow. Ask her.
Yep. I was hoping she was here so we could all hear it.
Or we could just ask the sheriff. Okay.
So that was dealing with items 26 and 27 for the overtime. Moving on to number 28, County Council moves to. No, I'm on the wrong.
Override the executive's veto. Ordinance number 83, 28.
Oh, okay, yeah. So we're on 29. Moves to strike executive's veto ordinance 83 for action sheet 60 to reduce the community expense line item from $50,000 to zero. This was a 7-0 vote to decrease $50,000. It's a motion to strike as he seeks to veto for an increase. Any questions?
Excuse me. Yeah. You're 29, right?
Yes.
Okay. I'm good.
30, County Council moves to override executive veto of ordinance number, well, the same ordinance, as amended per action sheet 66 to transfer $500,000 to Pleasant Ridge Manor that has a matching and corresponding veto in the Pleasant Ridge budget. This was a 5-2. Any questions regarding that? Item number 31 moves the strike for action sheet 67 to reduce gaming revenue fund by 2 million rough dollars, right? 2.1. I'm really frustrated by this one, only for the fact that, it matches with the same issue in the planning fund where there were two revenues shown in the general fund for the same dollar amount. One said to go to grants to other organizations, and another that the administration later claimed was actually intended to go directly to the general fund. But there are no matching transfers under the gaming fund budget, which I'll say again is a separate budget that does not contain that transfer. It's a check without a routing number. I'll also say by vetoing $2.5 million for EMS and $2 million for municipal gap fund, plus the other $100,000 and this $2.1 million, and only having a fund balance appropriation that they're seeking to add back in of $4.2 million, there is not enough money in the gaming fund budget to accommodate these transfers without a similar reduction in spending in other areas or a further fund balance appropriation. So even should this somehow have some legal basis, which I think the majority of council says, no, you cannot veto to increase a revenue of fund balance appropriated. I don't see how this money would ever arrive at its destination in the first place.
And that speaks right to, well, never mind. Never mind.
I know where you're going. I hear you. Yeah, I think that's important. This was a 7-0. I think that all of us agree that the duplicate revenue that was shown in the budget was in error and that the appropriate correction was to eliminate it. And then the last one is relating to the millage increase of 0.51 mils that they seek to veto. Attorney Talarico, if you could touch base on this, because I'm not entirely sure why we have a moves to strike. If you can touch base on that, let us know your legal opinion on that.
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Firstly, the executive's veto is of the word for word, a tax increase millage. That's what he vetoed, the tax millage increase. Now, I've never ever seen a veto of that. It really doesn't mean a whole lot or have any force or effect if all you're doing is vetoing the increase in the tax millage. I have an idea of why he thinks along those lines, and it does relate to the case that's pending in court. But before I get into that, one would have to generally interpret his intent to veto the tax millage increase as his intent to veto ordinance number 84, which is the real estate tax levy. So if he were to do that and council didn't override it, or it would be no different if council as a group decided after agreeing to all of the expenditures, pass a budget without any tax revenues to pay for the expenditures. So what this means is that if his veto, not overridden or stricken, would bring the budget to zero, and there would be no revenues whatsoever to pay for the expenditures. And Kenny is here, isn't he?
Yeah.
Kenny Bonus?
I'm here.
Kenny, you heard me. Could you comment on that further?
Yeah, I think how you're interpreting it sounds reasonable. And it seems like the vote was to set the millage in general. So then if he's vetoing it, then there's no millage to be set at all with the interpreted veto right here.
Now, if he intended, though, instead because the millage is part of ordinance number 84, which is the real estate tax levy. So if you interpret his veto broadly enough to encompass the veto of of 84, the real estate tax levy, would that not bring the budget to, would that not be bring the revenues to zero?
Yeah, because if you were voting on the millage as a whole with ordinance 84, then to me, it seems like he'd be striking all millage.
Okay, so that's the problem that I have with that. But now I'll give you my theory of how I think he's thinking. For some reason, the administration has wrongly but always felt that the proposed budget of the executive has legal significance, and it doesn't. It's like the will of a living person. It doesn't have any legal force or any significance until that person dies. But he believes that whatever he vetoes or whatever council tries to reduce, and so long as he vetoes it, that it reverts back to his proposed budget. So that if council eliminates a position, for example, he thinks that if he vetoes it and it's not overridden, that he's restored the position back to his original budget, and that is absolutely not the case. There is only one final budget, one ordinance. This proposed budget is not from the executive. That's not an ordinance. It doesn't have the effect of law or the force of law, and it wouldn't make sense because council is the appropriating body. So what happens then is when council passes the budget, that's it. And you can't play around with vetoes thinking that everything will be restored to his insignificant wish list, which is his proposed budget. That's not how it works. But that's what I think he thinks and his administration think. And that's why you see the veto.
If I can add to that too, because I think it's important. At the end, when we discovered what the end result of the successive, I think what I've said was borne out to be mostly true, that the expenses reflected in the budget were not totaled correctly on the face value, that there were duplicate revenues that inflated the revenue, and that the deficit that we faced was actually much larger than 3.8. And we could have had two choices with the the 6 million-ish deficit that we faced. We could have made an action sheet to increase the fund balance appropriated, or we could have increased the tax millage. And in truth, with the tax increase, we should have had an action sheet still to reduce the fund balance appropriate of 3.8 million, but we did not. And that's a bit of an issue. But given if this veto was somehow to have some legal standing, and we face a Boolean choice between not having a tax increase at all, if we don't have the tax increase, right now the budget is underfunded by that delta between I believe it was $6.7 million and the general fund appropriated of 3.8. That delta has not been filled in any meaningful way, or not meaningful way. It just hasn't been filled, and that represents a problem. And to say that they vetoed the tax increase is to say that this budget is out of balance, that the revenues and expenditures do not match.
Can't make it up.
So I know that was a 4-3, and I understand everybody's positions on it. I get it. But the idea that we have a budget that at some point, it is theoretically possible, not highly probable, but theoretically possible that we run out of revenues prior to the end of the year without a supplemental appropriation. Any thoughts or concerns for the whole?
Mr. Chair.
Yes, sir.
I just want to speak also to one thing regarding the tax increase. If you do recall, it was both of my opinion and Kenny's opinion that if any time you are going to increase wages in the budget as well, that there should be a subsequent tax increase, because those increases in wages are reoccurring expenditures, and they will continue to compound as to benefits. And based on the Home Rule Charter, the fund balance cannot be used for reoccurring expenditures, only one-time improvements, nothing that's reoccurring. So by vetoing the tax increase, you are effectively increasing a reoccurring expenditure that is going to be needed, that needs to be funded in some capacity, which cannot be the fund balance as per the Home Rule Charter. And I just wanted to make that point clear so everyone's aware that a tax increase is just needed based on that pure premise alone, as these positions have to be funded through a tax increase and not the fund balance. That's all.
Thank you. Any other questions or concerns? Would it be prudent for us to take a vote or just by acclamation or by objection to move the ordinance forward as amended in this meeting? Any thoughts or opinions?
If we can do it and it's legal, I don't have a problem with it.
I think
So we
Tom should probably weigh in on that one.
Yeah.
So what was well, you're asking whether this ordinance could be moved tomorrow at tomorrow's meeting?
That as amended, because the published ordinance that you had previously written.
Yeah,
You talk about the whole document.
Just
Yeah.
making sure that everyone is
No,
in
what-
complete agreement that we are in good standing to move the amended ordinance forward.
Well, no, if you read my memo that accompanied this, I said attached is the amended ordinance to override. The amendments are minor and appear on ordinances numbers, and I named the ordinances.
Mhm.
And I said, after Rock has moved to amend the ordinances or to amend the ordinance, then council can pass the amendments and the attached amended ordinance can serve as council's final action. So it'd be no different than any other ordinance that came before council. It's just that we've already completed the amendments and we don't have to scribble anything.
So you're saying that that should be a motion during the meeting tomorrow
Correct.
to amend the ordinance, and then we will proceed from there.
Correct.
Okay. I'm good with that.
All right.
Question.
Yes.
Tom, do we have a makeup date yet for that court date regarding the 2023 budget?
We're trying to work at either next Thursday or Friday.
Thank you, sir.
We're waiting to hear back from the judge.
Thank you, sir.
All right. If there's no more discussion relevant to the vetoes, I'll take a motion to enter into executive session to discuss the personnel matter. Or do I just move?
This
So
should be-
moved. Move.
Yeah.
Okay. Megan, if you could take care of putting people in a waiting room or such. It would just be just the 7 of us, please.
I am leaving.
Thank you for everything, Tom. Appreciate it.
See everybody tomorrow.